So, some interesting bit of gossip circulating MMA media right now is that Khamzat Chimaev will be moving up to fight Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight title. Now, where does this news come from, you may ask? Well, it comes from My Mixtapes with a Z at the end. You know, one of the most beloved sources of MMA news. And you know what? Honestly, upon first seeing this, I was skeptical. I thought there was no way. But you know what, though? Upon thinking about it and upon just kind of looking at the UFC light heavyweight rankings, it does kind of start making a little bit of sense. I mean, Alex Pereira has kind of cleared out the division. He's beaten everybody that anybody would possibly want to see him fight. There's absolutely nobody left that would generate any kind of interest from a wide audience. And therefore, well, you might as well give him Khamzat Chimaev, right? I mean, fuck it. Fuck it. And, you know, again, though, I'm kind of confused about this because do you guys remember what Dana White said when Jon Jones offered to go back down to light heavyweight, you know, the division that he comes from? Dana White said no, he likes Alex Pereira.
I like Alex Pereira. I like him personally, you know.
But he's just the greatest of all time, right?
It just doesn't make sense to make that fight.
Was his exact words. So, I mean, in theory, you would have to say he feels a bit different about Khamzat Chimaev than Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, which, look, I can kind of understand why. Because Khamzat Chimaev, look, for how much of a motherfucker he is right now, I do think that there is still a lot of unanswered questions about the guy. I mean, look, just to be fair here, everybody is kind of acting like, you know, when he fought Robert Whittaker, he just went in there, took him down, fucked him, and then submitted him round one. That's kind of what everybody is acting like happened. And it's funny, because that is exactly what happened, but, I mean, we have to be honest, there was some fluky elements to all of that. I mean, we just got to be honest about that, right? I mean, look, again, Khamzat was doing an amazing job with his top control, with his back takes, with his pinning ability, with his reshots. It was all a problem, but the final sequence that made Whittaker tap shouldn't have made him tap like that. All right, he had a pre-existing injury. His teeth were fucked, and, you know, because of that, they broke from the choke, and Whittaker started panic tapping the second Khamzat grabbed it, which isn't normal. And, of course, you look, Khamzat did not fully have his back secured. Because Khamzat did not have this hook in theory, there's nothing stopping Robert from just turning into him. Now, if Khamzat had had both of his hooks in, well, then you could have said, well, Whittaker wasn't going anywhere and his face was getting cranked on. He was going to get subbed at some point. But you can't say that with this sequence. So, look, Khamzat Chimaev, there's always been a massive question mark on whether or not he can last all 5 rounds. Because frankly, he doesn't fight with a style to go 5 rounds. He kind of just goes for broke at you. And everybody was expecting that this fight was going to be different. That he was going to pace himself, that he was going to try to fight more intelligently. And, you know, he didn't really do that. No, he kind of just went right after Robert Whittaker the second the fight started. So there is still a massive question mark on whether or not he can actually last if the guy he's fighting survives round 1. And look, if Alex Pereira can just survive and they start getting into the later rounds and we start seeing prolonged periods of them striking, obviously Khamzat Chimaev just frankly is not a very good striker. I mean, he's good offensively, but defensively, he pretty much sucks all the way around, which we'll look at in depth towards the end of the video. But still, despite all of this, nobody is giving Alex Pereira a chance here in a hypothetical fight. They're saying that he's fucked. They're saying he's going to get steamrolled round 1. And look, I get it. I understand. But let me provide a counterpoint for you, okay? What jiu-jitsu belt is Khamzat Chimaev? Not a black belt. He is not a black belt. What jiu-jitsu belt is Alex Pereira? A black belt. I bet you didn't think about that. So, I mean, I don't know. For whatever that's worth, I guess Alex Pereira, he could always hit him with one of his favorite submissions, the lead left hook, and that just works on anybody. All right, that works on anybody. That you know what I mean? That's a tough one to avoid. But in all seriousness, I mean, this fight, it's difficult to gauge because, again, there is going to be a massive size disparity between them if a fight like this were to ever happen. I mean, just look at Khamzat Chimaev sparring with Alexander Gustafsson. Gustafsson, you know, is listed at just about 6'5", and I mean, Alex Pereira, I would say, is very, very close to that height, that size, and I mean, Gustafsson just absolutely dwarfs Khamzat. Khamzat is going to be so tiny in this fight, and again, right, of course the wrestling ability is not going to be close, but again, this size difference, it's going to play a factor somewhere. And honestly, it can kind of play a factor both ways. For Alex Pereira, it is going to be really difficult for Khamzat to keep him down and to pin him. Obviously, when he was fighting Robert Whittaker, Khamzat did an amazing job getting his head higher than Whittaker's, making him carry his weight, constantly threatening with a body lock and trying to slide his hooks in. It just made it pretty much impossible for Whittaker to stand back up. But, you know, when you look at Alex Pereira versus Jan Blachowicz, who, of course, Jan Blachowicz is also fucking massive, and he had a body triangle on Alex, fully locked in, and Pereira never allowed himself to get flattened out. He stayed on his knees. He just did a good job keeping his posture up and making Jan Blachowicz have to carry all of his own weight on the body triangle. And this just absolutely fries your legs. Now, so many people are like, well, you know, Jan Blachowicz gassed in that fight because of the elevation. I'm like, well, Pereira was also fighting at elevation. The reason why Jan Blachowicz gassed so bad is because holding a body triangle from this position for an entire round is absolutely brutal. And Alex Pereira, if he was fighting Khamzat is going to have a tough time keeping him down because, again, he's going to be getting dwarfed here. And, of course, like I've said before, when you look at some of these rear naked choke attempts that Jan was trying on Pereira, I mean, these were tight. He has Pereira's face square with the choke, which is exactly what you need to finish it over the face. And there were moments where Jan was starting to sneak his hand behind Pereira's head. I mean, this is a very, very tight submission here, and Alex was able to survive. I mean, frankly, this was a lot tighter than this was right here. I mean, it just was. This attempt was not nearly as good. The hand positioning was not nearly as good. And, you know, Pereira was able to survive. Though, on the inverse, being smaller can actually really help you finish the rear naked choke. Obviously, in MMA, because you're wearing the big, bulky gloves, it can be really hard to fully slide your hand behind your opponent's head in the choke. But Khamzat, again, being smaller, it could be a lot easier for him to sneak his forearm under the throat, sneak his hand behind Pereira's head. Obviously, Jan Blachowicz has these big fucking muttons on the end of his arms. All right, that's going to be difficult to fully sink that choke in the way you need to. But I think Khamzat genuinely being smaller can actually help him here. But look, of course, this only matters if Khamzat can actually take Alex Pereira down. And can he? Again, I mean, well, fucking yeah, I think so. Because the way Khamzat Chimaev shoots his takedowns, it's fucking absurd. He basically is shooting a blast ankle pick. He gets so low and he shoots so fucking fast. You have to sprawl hard. I mean, that's the only way. You have to pretty much prevent Khamzat from getting to your ankles. And Alex Pereira being so much bigger, you have to time the sprawl very precisely. And that's going to be difficult to do against a far quicker opponent. Though, of course, a big factor in defending these blast ankle picks from Khamzat is making sure you're not up against the fence. I mean, that was Robert Whittaker's problem. When he tried to sprawl off Khamzat's shot, problem was he was up against the fence. So he couldn't sprawl. You have to try to stay out in the open. That's going to be the one way you can actually sprawl. Again, though, I think for Alex Pereira, his game plan should be to survive, get this fight into the later rounds. Because if Khamzat can't finish him, and we start getting into the third, fourth, fifth round, and this fight ends up being on the feet for prolonged periods of time, that is where Khamzat Chimaev is fucked. Because Khamzat Chimaev, based on what we've seen from him throughout his entire career, just honestly, he's not a very technical striker at all. I think offensively, he's very dangerous. I think that he obviously hits very hard. Because he switches stances so fluidly, he can give you a lot of looks on the feet. But again, I mean, he's just not that technical. You know, when you watch him strike, he's always feinting very heavily. He's bobbing his shoulders back and forth, which in theory is a great way to hide strikes, to set things up, but he doesn't actually do that. He just kind of devolves into trying to brawl with you. Gilbert Burns, look, right, nothing but love for Gilbert Burns, but he himself is not a technical striker at all. Khamzat Chimaev was way longer, way taller, pretty much had every physical advantage, and he just threw it all away so we could bite down on his mouthpiece and go to war with him. And I mean, right, that's all you really gotta know, right? He took a lot of damage in that fight. To compare Gilbert Burns to Alex Pereira, those are very two opposite ends of the spectrum. Of course, though, some people would say, they'd go, okay, yeah, but Khamzat Chimaev, he made a mistake in that fight because, he's used to running through everybody. That was one of the first times that he couldn't do it. So, it was a big lesson learned for him, that fight. And I would tell you, no, you're wrong still, because he still runs through everybody. I'm like, we know, right? Khamzat Chimaev lacks defense, does not defend leg kicks well, doesn't have any head movement, and the reason why his defense isn't great is because he's so used to running through everybody that the second he can't do that, the second his opponent is still standing right in front of him and he's kind of emptied the gas tank, I mean, he's kind of fucked. And right, look, I understand he probably made a mistake against Gilbert Burns, but I mean, what's changed? Khamzat is still running through people. I mean, nothing's really changed. And I don't think you can just assume it's going to be completely different against Alex Pereira. I guarantee you, Khamzat is convinced he's going to run through Alex Pereira. And I mean, look, maybe he does, but if Pereira survives and they end up on the feet, I mean, I think that, look, what I think this fight comes down to is it will not be close, again, on two opposite ends of the spectrum. It either is not going to be close in the sense of Khamzat takes him down, immediately chokes him, or it's not going to be close in terms of Alex Pereira is just going to survive and endure the first couple of rounds, use his superior size and strength to just kind of stay safe, not let Khamzat over-manipulate him or land any damage. And the second this fight is on the feet for any prolonged period of time, I mean, what's Khamzat going to do? I mean, giving up that amount of size on the feet is going to be detrimental. If Pereira lands one time, Khamzat's fucked. And again, though, look, I am still very skeptical that this fight's going to happen, but I mean, look, I don't know. Ankalaev is not next, apparently. Dana White says something amazingly absurd is going to be happening 2025. This does kind of fit the bill. And you know what? For the UFC, it's kind of a win-win. If Alex Pereira wins, well, Alex Pereira won. If Khamzat Chimaev wins, he's now the 205 champion. Now he can go get double champ status down at 185. I mean, look, I don't know. But it's interesting. It's interesting.